More streaming from home options this week, starting with The High Note, which stars Tracee Ellis Ross as a musical superstar, diva-esque character. And if you aren't aware, Tracee Ellis Ross is the daughter of musical superstar, I won't say diva, because I don't think personality-wise necessarily she falls into that stereotype, but Diana Ross. So, however, they've tried to make it very clear this is not meant to be a portrayal of her mother. So we follow her character, a character named Grace Davis, made up, musical superstar, and she has this assistant played by Dakota Johnson, who aspires to be either a music producer or something in the music industry, but she has been very locked into this kind of assistant lifestyle, and I think she realizes that she has hit a wall in terms of the grind. And the movie takes a look at these two women at sort of junctions in their careers. Tracee Ellis Ross's character is, a woman of a certain age in an industry that is not particularly kind to age, is being told basically just keep remixing your hits, nothing new, just keep on keeping on, keep the bills going, do a stadium tour. I think there's a hilarious plot line about a Vegas residency. There's that easy path of just keep on keeping on versus continuing to innovate. And even if that doesn't necessarily resonate immediately with your audience, doing it for the sake of the artistry. And then you've got this parallel storyline for Dakota Johnson where it's okay, well, you could be an assistant forever, but when are you going to try and take your chance? The movie could just focus on that, but then there's all this other stuff with a romance storyline and it's all of it is stuff that we have seen before, and all of it is very predictable. And that's okay. I think it's okay to have comfort films right now. I don't think every film has to challenge you right now. It's a lot wish fulfillment. It takes place in this music bubble. It's a very music film. There's a lot of references to music, and characters are all oh, I know this deep cut of this, and I am not a music person in that sense, right? I have plenty of music I listen to and I love, but I don't know a lot about music history because that's just not my forte. And I think this movie is trying to show off in that sense. And if you aren't that person, you're just gonna be yeah, sure, you're referencing all this other stuff. I think the performances are fine. Dakota Johnson, not my favorite actress. She's the exact same in every movie. If that's her cup of tea, great. I think Tracee Ellis Ross is amazing in this. I think she plays that sort of diva character with a likability to her, right? You don't hate her. She's not the Miranda Priestley of Devil Wears Prada. She is a character who has her own story arc, and it's nice to see not only an actress of color, but a successful female character who is facing issues that real successful women, especially, maybe a little bit more mature, are facing. You've got Kelvin Harrison Jr. as a love interest for Dakota Johnson. He seems a very talented young man. And then I think my two favorite performances in the film are Ice Cube shows up, not as a musician, but plays the superstar character's manager. And Ice Cube is just so watchable, obviously, and obviously knows he's so familiar with the music business. And I think he gets some of those nuances that even as people who don't have experience with managers of music industry, you can tell oh, there's authenticity to this. And then Diane Raphael, who I just admire so much, and I love what she does with the Jane Club and empowering women. She plays this kind of, I don't want to say, well, no, it's a little bimbo-esque character, maybe a Ghost of Christmas Future for Dakota Johnson's character. She plays a former assistant who just kind of sticks around and lives in the pool house of Tracee Ellis Ross's character. And it's just fun and wild and the most absurd. And I like that it got absurd. Then you round out the cast with Zoe Chao. Eddie Izzard shows up for a bit as a musician, which was an odd choice. But there's a lot of people I love in this movie. But I just don't know if they're fully utilized. But Eddie Izzard, Bill Pullman plays Dakota Johnson's dad. I guess Diplo plays a music producer at some point. I didn't know what Diplo looks like. I couldn't describe what Diplo looks like even after having seen the film. It's a fine watch. The director directed Late Night, which was one of my favorite films of last year. I think she does a really good job of portraying women, and not just women, but successful women, and the challenges that successful women face. And I think it's really refreshing to see ambition, unadulterated ambition and goals and all this stuff. If these movies took place about men, nobody would ever be oh, that person's overstepping. And so I like seeing successful women portrayed on film like that, because I feel especially as I'm getting older and as my friends are getting older and we're all getting various levels of success, and success is relative to what you do and how you define it, but you see professional success and both with Tracee Ellis Ross's character and Emma Thompson's character in Late Night, and then the people who are aspiring to hit that next level with Dakota Johnson, Mindy Kaling's character. I think she handles those dynamics really well, and those are the strongest parts of the film, and I almost wish it didn't dip into the other stuff, but then you wouldn't get big backing. So I totally understand where it came from. If you're a music person, you might really enjoy this. I think it's a little long, even though it's only about 2 hours. But if you see the trailer and you like the trailer, you're like, I know exactly what I'm in for, so go for it. If you see the trailer and you're like, no, thank you, you know exactly what you're in for, pass on it. I'm going to give it 3.3 out of 5. And then next up, I have a film called The Vast of Night, which is on Amazon Prime. And this movie made me irrationally angry at it. And I don't know if it's the movie's fault entirely. So it takes place in the 1950s. It's kind of like a sci-fi, a little Twilight Zone-y, little Close Encounters. My thing was, I have seen this movie before. And this movie, not exactly this movie before, but I feel like this movie is almost every grad student thesis film / really ambitious, maybe undergrad film, student film. It felt like a very, very polished film student film. And I know how hard it is to get a feature done, and I respect the people who got it done. And I think it is, again, it's well put together, but I don't find it interesting or innovative. And it's getting a lot of praise for that. And I'm just like, this is actually what it really felt like was a glorified play that had been put on film. And there are lots of scenes where it's, there's telephone operators and switchboards, and you just have one character on screen for a really long time, just talking to no one, or monologuing, or whatever it may be. Like, there was like a 10-minute monologue scene that I was just like, this is indulgent, because it goes from being like, oh, cool, we don't really see that often, right? Like, we see lots of fast cuts. Characters don't always get the time to breathe on screen in movies, especially TV, probably a little bit more so if you're in a longer series, because it's like, oh, there's more time to unpack the story. But at a certain point, it goes from being like, oh, this is refreshing. That's cool that they have taken this almost risk to hold the attention span of the audience for this long, to being like, you're just being indulgent. And I think in a play or maybe a musical, if you're sitting there and you're basically hostage, it works a little bit better, right? Like, you can connect. They're in the room. They're playing to you, basically. This is like they're playing to nothingness, and it did not work for me. Basically, the film school themes of this movie really showed for me. And if you didn't go to film school, like, you might love this movie, and it might be great, and it might be refreshing, and I don't want to ruin it for anyone. Like, I don't want to, necessarily take away from any joy you take from it. But for me, I was just like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I can see where you went, oh, we've got budget enough to do this one really crazy shot. Let's do this one really crazy shot. Oh, we're going to make them sit through this monologue. Oh, we're going to do this stuff. And so for me, it just really took me out of it. And yeah, the pacing is, again, not necessarily something that we're used to seeing, and that can be really good, but I think in this case it abuses it a little bit. And it also tries to get like political and topical in places where I'm like, I don't feel like this is being shoehorned in. And I feel like they were like, what would really push it over and really get that funding is if we made it about race or made it about this. And I'm like, just stop. It got really overhyped for me, basically, and I'm trying to temper your expectations. I think if it sounds really appealing to you and you like the trailer, much like the last one, like, I think you'll know very quickly whether or not you want to see it. It's very 50s, right? Everyone talks in a very whatever way. And I think, with all due respect to the filmmakers, congrats to them on getting a film done and picked up by Amazon. And I think it's really great, but I do not necessarily recommend this film. And I had to check myself a little bit, because right after I saw it, I was just like, this has made me very angry. And I acknowledge irrationally so. And I was like, is this envy? Is this envy at not having a film produced in this way? But I don't think I ever really wanted that. So I think it was just, it was actual anger at being like, I have seen this before, in part, again, because of the schooling I had, and because of I went to school with a bunch of very talented filmmakers. And so I have seen films that are on par, if not better than this, not get theatrical or streaming releases, and been like, well, why did this? I've seen better. And that's not to say that this is a bad film, but for me personally, I just did not. And again, as a huge fan of sci-fi, right? Like a huge sci-fi nerd, I was just like, this is not my type of film. So I'm only going to give it 2.2 out of 5. And then finally, popping over to TV for a second, if you have Hulu, I watched all of The Great, and it is the story of Catherine the Great, who is played by Elle Fanning, who not normally a fan of, but found her tolerable, I guess is the nicest thing I could say about her. I think this character fits for her. She, it's the very beginning of her life in Russia. She just moves there, is married off to Peter of Russia, who is played by Nicholas Hoult, who I think he does such a good job in this film because he plays a deranged leader who is just obsessed with, bacchanalian joys and could not give a shit about a war that's raging on or the state of his country. And I'm just like, oh, wow, this doesn't sound familiar at all. But I think he, and again, it could be tough to watch as a parallel, but I think he does a really refreshing job of playing it. You don't hate him necessarily. And I think it takes a lot to do that. And much like Tracee Ellis Ross's character in The High Note, just to bring it back, like these characters who like you very easily could hate them, but they become appealing and watchable because of, I think, one, the writing, but two, the performances of the actors. The supporting cast is rounded out by a bunch of really talented people, some of whom you'll be like, that person looks familiar, which was most of my reaction to the entire thing. And then I just would constantly have to look people up. There's a little bit of a Skins reunion from Sebastian de Souza, plays a lover of Catherine the Great's. Gwilym Lee from Bohemian Rhapsody, because I was like, who is this actor? He plays a friend of the king, and I was just like, who's that guy? And then I looked it up, and I realized it was Gwilym Lee. I was like, oh, without the Brian May hair, very different looking, or very, differently recognizable. I don't know anything about the history of that actual era, so for me, I was just like, oh, I'm just going to enjoy this. And also, I don't think it's meant to be like a historical fiction, to the thing. It's got colorblind casting, it's very absurd, but I enjoyed it. It's 10 episodes. I think, it's crude, it's funny. I appreciate going back to the theme of women with ambition and power. I like the way that she has a character arc. So The Great on Hulu, I think it's worth checking out.